TV. Of course, in the studio, I don't do this alone. I have someone who makes it work really well when we come for this very unity trend thing. And so he is in the studio. I'm talking about Mr. Shuabu Joro. He's an in-house analyst for Unity 93.3 FM and TV and a political scientist. He will be saying a very big good morning to our listener and our viewer. Shuabu, good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, viewer and listener. We hope you had a beautiful weekend, and thank you once again for staying tuned to Unity 93.3 FM and, of course, TV. It's a pleasure to be with you once again this morning. We look forward to an interesting interaction as usual.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to let you know this morning that we have the representatives of Water Board in the house this morning, and later on at 8:30 they will be live on air, and so you may want to get ready to throw in your questions and get to know what is happening with the issues of water in your community. Of course, on this platform, one of the things we cannot afford to stop doing is to talk about the need for you to have peace within, because it is only when you have peace within that you would be able to extend same to people around you. So peace is priceless. Thank you so much for staying tuned. And now, let's see what we have on our national dailies, and that's what we do on the first segment of Unity Trend every morning. Once it is 8, we come on air, and then we do it. We don't do this alone. Stay tuned, and then let's do it together. This one is coming from Daily Trust, and it says, "Don't blame Western democracy for Nigeria's leadership crisis." Ex-minister has this to say, and that's what it is. We've been talking about democracy is not working, and recently former President Olusegun Obasanjo said democracy has failed not only in Nigeria but in Africa, and he was of the opinion that it's time to consider something to add up, maybe cut off some other aspects of it, and so maybe it will work this time around according to former presidents. And now someone is saying it's not to be blamed, or it's not to blame rather. And so Dora.
Yeah, well, the issue is coming up again. It's resurging, right? And I think it's an interesting debate, of course, between former President Obasanjo and former Minister of Land, Housing and Urban Development, Chief Nduese Essien, who was speaking yesterday, somewhere in, I think, Uyo, Akwai, right? Yeah, this is it. Now, of course, we have said lots of things about this, even in the past, could be, and I think, when we talk about democracy, its viability, its workability, its sustainability, its feasibility, and whatever it is that you want to talk about as far as Nigeria and Africa is concerned, I think, at the end of the day, it will all depend on what we think, what we make of it, how we feel about it, and probably the peculiarities, that define and, decide or determine its modus operandi and things like that. I think that's exactly the situation. Now, we did, allude or conclude, or admit to that Obasanjo was not wrong to have actually alluded that, Nigeria's or Africa's democracy or Africa's version of democracy might just need some sort of tinkering. It might just need some sort of, some sort of makeup, if you want to put it that way, some sort of, cosmetics, to make it a little bit workable and things like that. You understand? Because at the end of the day, according to Obasanjo, it's a Western idea, and it has actually still failed to, fit into, our cultural fabric as a people and things like that. And we did say yes, it makes some sense to actually, suggest that something should be done, about Africa or Nigeria's version of democracy. If you look at countries where democracy is thriving, you discover that, it's a blend of a bit of their culture, a bit of, in fact, to some extent, a bit of dictatorship. You understand? In China, for example, there are things you just can't do. The world is trying to abolish death sentence for certain offenses and things like that. But in China, if you're guilty of corruption, the penalty is death. I think Western or liberal, you know, or advocates of liberal democracy would say that's extreme. They would say that's overboard. They would say that is despotic or dictatorial. But it's working for them, isn't it? Because as a result of the severity, you know, or the stringent nature of the punishment, you know, you don't even dare it. You don't contemplate it. You understand?
Yes.
Now that's what I'm saying, that every nation in the world can have its own version of democracy, depending on their peculiarities, depending on what they feel, you know, can work for them. You know, this is the issue. So I think at the end of the day could be, former Minister Essien is actually saying that, you know, Obasanjo was right to have made that assessment. And to be fair to Obasanjo, it is true that there are aspects of our democracy that are not really working. But at the end of the day, again, you know, we don't just blame the entire system. You know, it's like trying to throw away the baby with the bathwater, and it's not going to make sense. So the issue here is that, you know, it is true that there are aspects of it that are not working, but also, you know, there is a need for some sort of introspection. There's a need for some sort of, you know, inward looking, right? There's a need for some sort of self-assessment. If it's not working in Nigeria, you know, what are the things that we do? You know, how is the system being managed in Nigeria? You understand? Because it could be, the last time I checked, Nigeria's version of democracy is different, totally different from what obtains in America, for example. And this is the same America whose model of democracy we are trying to copy. But I have always said that we have actually copied the system halfway. We have actually borrowed the idea, but actually ignored the underlying principles of the idea. And so we literally didn't even borrow it at the end of the day. You know, this is the whole issue. In America, for example, there is a proper system of checks and balances between the executive, the legislature, and the judiciary. And
it's working for them.
It's working for them.
Number one. Degree.
Number two, you know, there is what we call political or official toleration of official opposition. You know, the Democrats and the Republicans, you know, politically or ideologically they are parallel. But at the same time, you know, they tolerate each other to some extent. It's unlike what you have in Nigeria, where, you know, the APC and the PDP are literally at war, are literally enemies, and can hardly even coexist on the same, you know, political landscape and things like that. You know, this is the issue. In America, for example, you know, the electoral system is actually, you know, it's actually working. You understand? So that at the end of the day, you discover that, you know, elections are normally a reflection of the wishes and choices and preferences of a vast majority of the citizenry. But is that what we actually have in Nigeria? So former Minister Essien is actually saying, you know, it is true that there are aspects of Nigeria's democracy, or there are aspects of, you know, this Western idea of democracy that might not actually, you know, be, you know, friendly to our cultural system, our cultural values as a people. But at the same time, there are aspects of it that, if actually, you know, properly implemented, will actually make democracy work in Nigeria and in the whole of Africa. He drew attention, for example, to, you know, the virtual, you know, disappearance, or the virtual disappearance of political opposition. You understand? If a certain political party is in power, you discover that it sort of arrogates to itself, you know, almost a divine status, so that no other political party can breathe. When the PDP was in power, you know, for 16 years, you know, the voice of opposition was virtually silent.
Hardly heard, yes.
And the same thing is now seemingly repeating itself. There have been calls or allegations from certain quarters that the APC is trying to muzzle the opposition by way of actually, you know, manipulating the judiciary and things like that. Well, those are allegations anyway.
Yes.
But, you know, I think that it's something that is still part of the political culture at the moment. This is the issue. So you see, I think that is also something that needs to be corrected. And then again, you can even talk about, you know, judicial corruption. You understand? Is that what we actually have in America, for example, who actually sold this idea of democracy to us? The judiciary in America, for example, is transparent. It's accountable. You understand? You know, it's a system. It's an institution. Sorry, that actually is able to command the trust and respect and confidence of the citizenry, because it's able to actually dispense justice without fear and favor. Is that what we actually have in Nigeria? That is the issue. These are questions. And then, of course, I did say something about, the electoral culture or the electoral system in Nigeria and what obtains in America. Now, let's do a sort of a comparative analysis and see what are the areas of departure, what are the differences. This is the issue. In America, for example, citizens know that at the end of the day, election results can never just be any other thing than what, they actually decided during polls and things like this. Is that what